10 years of Final Fantasy XIV. I don't know if there's a game out there that is as hard to describe why it's so cherished and beloved to people who have not played it, while at the same time, if you have, you just immediately resonate when someone says they like Final Fantasy XIV. It's one of those truly unique experiences in the video games industry, and it's a game that has resonated with me like no other game ever has before. It's as simple as that. Now, I played a lot of games in the past. A lot. And I've always had a particular fondness for MMORPGs. Actually started way back when in the game called RuneScape. You know, before it was called old school RuneScape. And there was just something about being in an interconnected world with a bunch of other players from around the world that just gravitated me towards it. I liked the sense of incremental progression that you got with the medium that no other game ever really gave me before. Like every day when I logged in, I could accomplish something or make some kind of gain where I logged out and I felt like, hey, this was a good experience. Like a life away from life, if you will. And then I moved on to a game called World of Warcraft. I know, small indie game, no one's ever heard of it. And I played that game for about 9 years. And in those twilight days and months of my experience with that game, I started to crave a new adventure. I started to crave those feelings that I had for the medium and for that genre specifically, way back when I first started it. And I craved that feeling so much, so significantly, that back in college, a buddy of mine that I met there told me that he played a game called Final Fantasy XIV, and we kind of bonded over that fact. I would tell him about the history of World of Warcraft and the races to World First, which was an aspect of WoW that I followed quite closely for quite a while. And he would regale me with tales of his adventures in Final Fantasy XIV, his raid experience, the classes and the jobs, the storylines. He would enrapture me with this. You ever have a word on the tip of your tongue that you really want to say, but you don't know if that's the correct usage of it? It was a world that seemed magnanimous in its scope. A game that was extremely welcoming to people who were solo players, and for large swaths of my MMO ventures, I was a solo player. There were periods of times when I had guilds and other people to play with, but those times would always end. And then I moved to Final Fantasy XIV, and I tried it out. And I tried it out back in Heavensward on the free trial, in Gridania as a Lancer, and while the game was beautiful to my eyes, mechanically speaking, the long GCD just didn't do it for me, and I dipped out after a bit. Cut forward to a little bit after the Stormblood launch, and I followed the launch a little bit closely, because some of the WoW YouTubers that I watched at the time were covering the game, and it seemed pretty interesting. And you combine that with the stories my friend were telling me, and I wanted a new adventure. I tried other games, I tried other MMOs, and they just didn't do it for me. So I decided, you know what, Final Fantasy XIV is this free trial. Not the one we all know and love with the memes, right? Not that one. The one I started out with, the one I joined the game with, was the one that capped you at level 30. And I played the game, and I played Highlander Hure, because I'll be honest, I kind of just like playing the human. And I played a warrior, or I guess at that point the marauder. And I don't know how to describe it. It just clicked. The story was okay, but I found it compelling. Maybe I just loved the aesthetic of Final Fantasy XIV. Maybe that's part of it. It just seems so welcoming and inviting. And after years of trudging through various games and having series from my childhood deteriorate before my eyes, this game seemed fresh and, I would say new, but it was in Stormblood at the time, but it just seemed inviting. So I started playing the game, and I leveled up, and I started to become more and more enraptured with the narrative going on, and then you have a big twist in the story at level 30, right? I mean, I'm probably going to show B-roll for the video from, like, Shadowbringers and Walker, so let's just go full spoilers. Probably made that at the start of the video. Yeah, when the Scions get raided, and you just walk back to the Waking Sands, and you just see that all lined with corpses. That was the moment where I realized, oh my god, I'm playing an MMO that can actually tell a story competently, aren't I? And I don't know what it was about that singular moment but it showed me the breadth of diversity and experiences that the narrative could provide, and I became enraptured. I was thoroughly engaged with the narrative going on, and then I get freaking capped off at level 30. I'm like, I need more of this. Some time passes, and I eventually decide, you know what, I'm gonna try this game. So that buddy from college is like waiting with bated breath, telling me what world and server he's on, so that we could party together, and I start the game, and I'm like, you know what? Dragoon looks sick. If you don't know my aesthetic preferences, let me boil it down to two kind of archetypes. Well, three. Big muscle dude that either has something to do with dragons or giant robots. So needless to say, I played a freaking Dragoon Highlander Hero, and I was set. I was raring to go. And I progressed through the game. I catch up to where I was. And in retrospect, it's kind of an interesting coming full circle moment where I started the free trial on Lancer and dipped, and then the character that would go on to become the character I still play to this day would also be a Lancer. I loved Force Zones, and so Gridani also just kind of drew me in. And then I play A Realm Reborn, and I know a lot of people like to say that A Realm Reborn's kind of bad or kind of okay at best. I honestly really liked it. It introduced a lot of key aspects and mechanics of the game that I found completely cool and engaging. I loved coming up with my own chocobo, naming him, leveling him up, having him as kind of my little buddy that followed me around the map. I like the idea of leave quests and guild quests and all that, Palace of the Dead, all these interesting mechanics that we kind of take for granted nowadays because a lot of them kind of dropped off over the years. But when I was first joining the game, they all coupled together alongside the Gold Saucer and the main story, and all the dungeons on offer and the boss fights, and it provided an experience that just didn't let go for me. I kept playing the game. I kept trying to play more. I could feel myself slowly and ever quicker falling more and more in love with the game. And then I got to the end of the A Realm Reborn story, and my god, you know, that cutscene, and you go into Heavensward, and Jesus, the jump in quality. Like, sure, it took me a few quests to get used to the new voices, but I got used to them quick, and I fell in love with every character. Final Fantasy XIV is one of those games where I like every character, and that's normally a hallmark of an amazing story for me, where there's no character that I actually groan about when they're on screen. I'm like, oh yeah, this guy, this guy, this guy. I may not remember every name or phrase, but there's no character that I actively dislike or think that detracts from the overall experience. It's one of those special games for me. I get through Heavensward and get the Stormblood, and oh my god, Illibird's Sacrifice. I think that's one of my favorite scenes in all of Final Fantasy XIV. It's one that's not talked about a lot, but especially when you take into account the entire narrative that went on with Stormblood, Illibird's final speech before he falls from the wall. My god. And the way that entire scene is shot, followed up by the battle between Shinryu and Omega. My god. I know the B-roll, like the footage you're seeing on screen probably doesn't match any of this, because I'm kind of filming this last minute, but if you know, you know. Final Fantasy XIV, and I'm going to try and make this some kind of profound statement, and not just the fact I didn't want to edit this in, but Final Fantasy XIV is one of those stories and experiences that is so treasured and beloved, where I could just talk about these moments, and you probably have an excellent recollection of these events, because they are that profound and they stick in your mind like glitter all over your hand from an art project. And I'll be honest, I liked Stormblood. I didn't like it as much as Shadowbringers or Heavensward, at least for the 4.0 story, but I still really liked it, and I kind of always defaulted to this position for myself when it came to how much I like each aspect of Final Fantasy XIV, where I said A Realm Reborn is a really good RPG, Heavensward is a Game of the Year game, in my opinion, Stormblood is the Game of the Year candidate, and then Shadowbringers and Endwalker are best game of all time contenders. And for me, I've even made a video before about how I think Shadowbringers is the best story ever told in the game. And my god, the Stormblood patches. I think some of my favorite moments in the entire game actually come from the Stormblood patches. Yotsuyu, all the Scions falling one by one. I loved mysteries like that, providing me with an interesting, good old whodunit, with supernatural elements affecting the ones we care about. The little sun scene. Final Fantasy XIV understands, and it kind of carried over into 16 in a lot of ways, but Final Fantasy XIV, Creative Business Unit 3, and all the writers that they have, they understand how to weave in the levity and the wholesome character developing moments alongside the series, and that's one of the aspects that I love about it. And people say it's kind of unfair to compare Final Fantasy XIV's story to a lot of other games because of its game length, but honestly for me, that game length could have easily been a massive detriment, but it's not, because they understand pacing, they understand how to fully flesh out a world and to slowly unravel it before you. They understand when they need to build a world or a cast of characters, or just let everything speak for itself. They're not afraid to have characters and scenes that are just there to be wholesome, or have Grahatia eating a burger. They're not afraid to have scenes like that. And I think in a smaller game, scenes like that can be seen as a detriment because you're using up valuable time that could go to more interesting narrative plot advancing points to, like, Grahatia eating a burger. But in a game that's going like 400, 600 hours long, having scenes like that can help you care about the characters and show them at both their best and at their worst. If you want us to care about a character, at least for me, right? You want me to care about a character, you have to show me them at their best and at their worst. If you're just showing me a bunch of stakes after stakes after stakes, and sadness and character death after character death, I'm just going to become disinterested and not resonate with any individual character. But when you show me scenes where these characters are genuinely enjoying life, right? That stuff matters. It really does, in my opinion. Because I then care about what happens to that character. Grahatia, as we move into Shadowbringers here, Grahatia is a character who, funnily enough, was introduced rather late in the game. Like, yeah, he was in a Realm Reborn, but I didn't even remember the dude. I had to have that one explained to me because I was told he was the guy from the Crystal Tower questline, and I did that questline. I still didn't remember him. But my god, the way they are so good at introducing a character so late in this game and making you care about them as if they were always there. I'm kind of going through that same thing right now with Zero. We'll get to her. But I mean, Shadowbringers, like, what can I say? Like, yeah, there's some moments where just like, okay. But even then, like, I like the mining town. I do. Having those smaller scale stories of just loss and sadness and grieving with loss, and how that story can be reflected on Thancred's character with Minfilia. I really like that. Like, sure, placement-wise, I care a little bit more about getting to VAR3 and all that, but it's still a story that I think needed to be told. And Shadowbringers overall, and I've talked about Shadowbringers a lot in this channel, Emet-Selch might be one of my favorite characters of anything ever. I'm gonna make a video later on in this week about why I love Kane as a character so much from Nier Replicant. Emet-Selch is probably a top 3 game character of all time for me, alongside Kane and Master Chief. I know, a bit of an eclectic cast, but still. The way they unraveled his narrative and made me completely change my opinions and perspective on the Ascians. Good storytelling 101. Not even 101, it's a masterclass. It really is. They had to spin so many plates throughout this game, and not one fell for me. Or at least if they did, I don't remember it. And then we get to Endwalker, and what can I say? I love Endwalker just as much as Shadowbringers. I know some people are either here or there with it. Like, they either love Shadowbringers more than Endwalker or vice versa. I love both of them. I really do. Like, sure, some of the stuff with the Moon Bunnies is a little bit slow, but the narrative with Fandaniel, the Ascians, Emet-Selch's continued narrative, I think Endwalker makes all the story that came before even more engrossing and engaging. Garlemald was an S-tier zone, same thing with all the other zones, honestly. And that final walk with Ultima Thule. Oh my god, the freaking walk with Vana? Jesus Christ. Talk about another character that's up there for one of my favorite characters of all time. And then Meteion. They introduced the antagonist for 500 or 600 hours of a story in the final 3 levels, and in my opinion, she is the perfect antagonist. How do you do that? Straight up, how do you do that? She was the perfect representation of the concept of despair for me. Also, shout out to the guy that drove by with a motorcycle. I think what I'm trying to get across when it comes to why I love Final Fantasy XIV so much is that in over 10 years, a lot of us have either come and gone, joined from the beginning, or joined relatively recently. I started around a little bit into Stormblood. I was around there at like 3.1 or late 3.0. That was when I really started to join the game. But Final Fantasy XIV, if you told anyone else to play any other game and to catch up to everyone you had to play 500 or 600 hours, no other game would work. Straight up, the game would die, but not Final Fantasy XIV, because it's that good. Because once you get started, you don't want to stop, at least for me. I can't speak for everyone, but for me, I didn't. And Final Fantasy XIV is at a bit of a crossroads, especially with Dawn Trail coming up. With the story moving in a new direction, it can easily go south from here, but I tend to be an advocate that I'll be an optimist or a pessimist depending upon what the evidence from the past has given me. And when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV and all the memories I have with it, and the stories that were told, and the burden of proof that has been provided by Square Enix and Creative Business Unit 3, and Yoshi P and all those developers and writers, they've given me reason for optimism, given me reason to believe that they can pull this off. Because it's a monolithic task. Because we're moving into a new story arc, where they're going to have to spend a lot of time world building. They've done it before, though. They've done it before, and they've done it expertly. I'm positive. I'm optimistic. I'm looking forward to it, because Final Fantasy XIV is a game that respects your time. You drop in, drop out, play hardcore, play casually. You can do whatever you want. The game's gonna be there. It's not gonna rush you, it's not gonna force your hand, but whenever you're willing to take that one extra step, like Vana or like the Warrior of Light in Ultima Thule, you can always take it. So many stories with this game, both in terms of the plot and the stories surrounding the game and its development, and the community around the game. It's one of those special things for me, and it's one of those signifiers that this is a special game. So hey, happy 10 years. Here's to the future. I'll call the video there for the day. Hope my rambling was somewhat comprehensible and enjoyable. And leave a comment down below with your experiences with Final Fantasy XIV. When did you start? When did you play? How'd you feel about it? I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear your perspectives, and hear your stories. Or I guess in this case, read them. So thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe, have a great day. Go play some video games if you can. And as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye bye everybody. Until we meet again.